Okay. All right. Now, Geneviève is our nutritionist. She's been working with us for a few years. For those who have not met her or have just come onto the Dev Squad, I think those are the only people that haven't seen her. Even the Talent Squad to Dev Squad should know her fairly well. She has a cross-country skiing background, which is great. And her relatives are also cross-country skiers, which is very great as well. And she's been a really helpful influence for our team in the last several years, including training and racing, which is awesome. We're trying to focus on the general prep phase of the schedule, just to make sure that the volume part of the year, where you're putting in all the time necessary for you guys to set the base for the rest of the year, and really this sort of a big indicator of speed for the winter. And maybe I would say, most people would say arguably the most important part of the entire year is right now. So I think this is a very good talk, just talking about what we're dealing with right now for sports nutrition and just general mindset around nutrition. So Jen, you can take it away.
Perfect, thank you for the intro. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so actually, yes, we are gonna talk about nutrition during general prep, but we're also gonna talk about nutrition periodization in cross-country skiing. So the goals for today are to understand what is nutrition periodization and to learn how to implement nutrition periodization in your YTP. Chris has told me that you're more involved now in planning your own YTP, or trying to, starting to understand how the YTP works and being involved in the planning of your training. Well, the same thing can be true with nutrition, how you can plan nutrition ahead of time. So we're going to talk about different aspects of sports nutrition today, mostly nutrition periodization. Like I said earlier, we're going to touch base on extreme environment, especially altitude, energy availability, and supplementation. So let's get started with a question for you. So in one sentence or a few words, how would you describe nutrition periodization? Like maybe it's the first time ever that you hear that term, and it's okay, you can just take a guess. What does that sound like? What does that mean to you? And if you don't know it, well, you can just say you don't know, but you can also just try to take a guess. It's probably something around nutrition or food. And then what is periodization? Have you heard of that? Maybe around training. So you can actually use the chat function in go ahead and write a comment or share your guess. So, and Adam also asked that you turn your cameras on. So anyone wants to, take a guess? Thank you, Eric, for, participating. Only eating bacon 3 times a week. Well, that's a form of periodization, right? So like how you plan kind of baking intake throughout the week. What should you be eating at what time? Yeah, awesome, Quinn. That's a really good answer, actually. I would say better than what Eric provided here. Okay, so we're gonna, I'm gonna give you the answer. So the long definition of what nutrition periodization is a plan, purposeful, and strategic use of specific nutritional interventions to enhance the adaptations targeted by individual exercise sessions or periodic training plans, or to obtain the effects that will enhance performance in the long term. So it's basically, how do you plan nutrition around your training to maximize the benefits of training so that you perform at your best. Yeah, so Eric also said fluctuating caloric intake with training demands. Awesome, that's actually a really key component of that. So we're gonna talk about this as well. So, you know, basically nutrition periodization is kind of the answer to the questions of how nutrition can enhance the effect of training on performance, and how can nutrition help reach my performance goal. So one kind of component of nutrition periodization is the energy and carbohydrate periodization. So something that we call fuel for the work required is part of nutrition periodization. So basically, what does that mean? Fuel for the work required is to provide the energy needed for the training session. So kind of two aspects here, and I'm sure, you know, that's gonna make sense for you. You probably already know those things, but it's more to be, to apply that with purpose that we're, you know, looking for here. So the first aspect is longer and more intense sessions should equal more food needed prior to these sessions. Kind of makes sense, right? Like the more training you do, the more food you should consume prior to the training. And when I say prior to the training, it's not like right before the training, but more kind of, you know, the meal before, or even the day before your training. Fueling adequately during training session is necessary for high quality training sessions. So basically it's saying that when you're fueled adequately, well, you have better training sessions, and so you can gain more from those sessions than if you're under fueled. Okay, so fuel for the work required basically is to provide the carbohydrates and the energy needed for your sessions and around those sessions. So what can go wrong if energy and carbohydrate periodization is not done properly? Again, I want to ask you to you know, use the chat and you know, provide an answer. You could, you know, go ahead and kind of guess something, but you may have heard of you know, what can happen wrong if you're not consuming enough calories or enough energy. Okay, muscle cramps. Yeah, that could be it. I would say it tends to be more linked around hydration. So if you're dehydrated, or kind of if you're really fatigued, but you know, maybe that could be one of the things that happen. What else can happen when you don't have enough energy or carbohydrates? When it's done well, or maybe when you have too much. Okay, you bunk, suboptimal training, bunking, yeah. What about on the long run, when you're not consuming enough calories for a long time? For a week, a month, caloric deficit, yeah. Loss muscle mass, awesome. So, you know, you're losing muscle mass over time, or you may not build as much muscle mass as you could with proper energy. And you could actually have also other consequences on health and performance. Let's look at those. Reds, exactly. Aha, that's my segue to you know, just touch base on reds. So for those of you who were there last year in August in the training camp in Revelstoke, we had actually a really good talk by Kelly Drager in, shoot, I forgot her name, the psychologist from Calgary. Maybe Chris can come there. Anyway, around reds. And so let's just touch base really briefly, because for those of you who were there, you know, you had a longer talk. But basically what energy availability is energy consumed minus energy expended. So whatever energy you take in, okay, that you eat, minus whatever energy you expend, you know, training or doing physical activity, that's, you know, whatever is left in terms of calorie, that's the energy available for all the other body functions. Okay, so like keep your bones healthy, or keep your muscle mass on, or keep your organs, you know, working, or your brain working properly, paying attention to this webinar, you know, things like that. So actually, you know, when when you have enough energy availability, then everything is going well. Like your body is adapting, you have good performance, etc. But low energy availability can actually happen over a day. So let's say if one day you're you're not eating enough and you're training a lot, then it may happen just for a day, can happen for a week or a longer period of time, or just a few hours actually in the day. Over time, when that develops over weeks, months, then you can develop something called REDS, or Relative Energy Deficiency Syndrome. So briefly, what are the outcomes of that? Well, they are negative in general, okay? So usually when there's not enough energy available for your body to maintain all the body functions, well, one of the first things that your body is gonna stop producing are sexual hormones. So for girls, that means your periods may stop or may be irregular. And for boys, that could be a bit less kind of obvious, but we often actually observe a decrease in sex drive, in those periods of time as well. And there are actually a lot of different negative outcomes due to those hormones being down, but also to other factors. But so one of these things is poor bone health, metabolic health, and also that's a recent finding is the red blood cells metabolism. So we see actually more link now between red, so if you don't have enough energy, and being iron deficient. So it seems to be kind of correlated. There's people who are, don't know what's happened here, who are in the reds tend to have a lower ferritin level. And we know that ferritin is really important in cross-country skiing for performance. There's other factors on psychological health, growth and development, so building muscle mass, for example, things like that. Okay, there's also negative performance outcomes. So, I mentioned the link with red blood cells and the ferritin levels. So obviously if you have low ferritin levels, then well, that's gonna impair your cross-country performance or may impair it. But can also have decreased training response. So what that means is that if you're training, you're still training as much, but you're not gonna get as much benefits from your training than if you were eating enough. Increased injury risk, so that's usually kind of stress fracture risk and stuff like that. Okay, so what are the signs? And that's more for a long term, okay? So like fatigue, poor sleep, lack of adaptation. So not actually, you're training really hard to put that muscle mass on and it's not happening, okay? So that could be one of the signs. Some for female, no menstruation or irregular menstruation. And then not being able to do all the training also, like kind of like lower training intensity and stuff. Okay, so these are the signs of low energy availability. The goal here is to prevent that, okay? Like provide enough energy when you need it so that you maximize training adaptations, but like not go overboard either, right? Kind of you want to be in that sweet spot. So we're gonna use or look at fuel for the work required strategies around meals and during training. Okay, those are kind of the main two approaches. And those are actually two kind of very like small scale periodization, because periodization means kind of changing over time or planning over time. And so, you can plan meal per meal, or you can plan kind of month per month. And so right now we're going to talk about how we plan it meal per meal or training after training. Okay, so some of you may have seen that already, but that's a plate model that was developed by the USOC. So You know, you can see that the proportion of vegetables and grains in the plate varies from one plate to another. So there's 3 different plates. The dark blue, that's light training or day off. In the middle, that green one, that's easy to moderate. And then on the right side, that's the hard training day. So on the left side, light training or day off, you can see that there's more vegetable and the plate is smaller as well. So that represents that you don't need as much calories or as much energy on a day off because, you know, you're not spending as much calories. So we're trying to match that needs. And so your needs are a bit lower. On an easy to moderate training day, you can see that the grain, the proportion of grain in your plate is increasing compared to the light training day. That's to account for extra fuel. And then the proportion of vegetable is a little bit decreased. Protein remains the same, okay? Protein just 1/4 of the plate the whole time. And then on a hard training day, you can see that half of the plate is filled with grains. That's to account for more fuel. And then the plate is bigger and there are things around the plate as well. So that's to also show or represent the fact that, you know, overall, you're also gonna eat more. And I quickly reviewed the questions to the questionnaire that you filled. I think you had until Saturday to fill it. And there was a question around, you know, on hard training days, how, you know, how do you change or do you change your eating habits? And I could see a lot of you are actually doing it where you're either eating more foods in general or either eating more carbohydrate-rich foods kind of on those days. So awesome. No, way to go. I think you may just want to think about those days that are on kind of a rest training day or a rest day, sorry. I think some of you didn't change and some did decrease the amount of food. So that may just be something to kind of be aware. But at the same time, if you're hungry on those rest days, then it's totally okay to eat more than the plate. Sometimes we just catch up a bit later and that's fine. But usually if we pay attention to eating enough during those high training days, then we may not play catch up, you know, as much or need to play catch up. Okay, so let's play a little game here. If you have a cell phone or a tablet, that's ideal. If you don't, and you want to use the same device that you're using for this Zoom meeting, then that's fine. Just open a different web browser and type in menti.com. So MENTI.com. And I'm gonna tell you what the code is. So the code is 685160. So just a fun quiz to look at the different plate models. And so you're gonna see pictures of different food plates. And then you're gonna, have to identify what plate model it is. So we already have 18 participants connected, awesome. Let's wait a few more seconds. So the code is 685160 and it's menti.com if you need that. Awesome, a few more are joining. Cool, are you ready? While we wait for everyone to join, I'm actually gonna answer one question that I saw in the chat. So someone asked me, is it bad to eat right before bed? No, it's not bad if you are hungry. So if you're hungry in the evening and you know, then it's totally fine to eat. Going to bed when you're starving, usually it's not a good strategy to go to sleep. And there's actually some research showing that some protein before bed can help to maximize protein synthesis. So let's say if you were to eat some Greek yogurt or a little piece of cheese or I don't know, cottage cheese or something like that, then that actually helps to you're basically building muscle overnight. Well, you know, that's if you were training that day. If you haven't been training that day, it's not going to help as much with building muscle overnight. Okay, let's get started. Chris said steak. Well, I mean, you know, that's actually makes me think of a good point. So for some people, eating right before going to bed makes them not sleep as well. Then, you know, if that's your case, and especially steak, which can be a bit kind of harder to digest, then, you know, if that's your case, then you may want to not wait until right before bed to eat. You may want to think a little bit, you know, eat a little bit earlier than that. Okay, let's start our quiz. We have 25 participants on. So what you have to do is that there's a picture of food, okay, of a meal, and then you have to say whether it's a rest, easy, moderate, or hard training day plate. Okay. So, and the faster you answer, the more points you're gonna get. Okay, this is some pasta with chicken and salad. Okay, everyone has voted. Awesome. Boy, good job. So yeah, that's kind of in the easy, moderate training plate. Let's see who's leading after one question. Ooh, it's really close. Sadie, well, good job. You know, only one question. Let's see how everyone's doing after, you know, after a few more. So it's the same question with the plate model. So that's some maki sushi. Obviously there's some rice and then the seaweed and some fish inside. Not a ton of vegetable, a little bit of cucumber here. And a ton of ginger can count as a vegetable here. So there's actually quite a lot of rice in maki sushi because it's, you know, if you think about it, there's rice all around it and just a little bit of fish in the center. So it can actually be quite a good way of eating, you know, high grain. Okay, so that's like a tofu sauteed with some rice under. It's a bit of a tricky because we don't see how much rice there is under it. You just have to, you know, do your best here. Then there's some broccoli and carrots. Ooh, so there wasn't a whole lot of rice, just a little bit on the side, and more tofu and vegetable. A tricky one. I think it's really a tricky one. Maybe easier if you have it in your plate and you can see all the components. I mean, I couldn't make it that easy. Okay, so that's like a plate of pasta. And then there's some chicken, some asparagus, red bell peppers in there. That looks actually yummy. Some good seasoning looks good too. Hard. Okay, awesome. We're finishing strong here. One more. Okay, that's some beef skewers with some couscous, and there's like vegetable with the couscous as well. Yeah, good job. Finishing strong. Everyone is doing. So now after all the questions, ooh, really close. Anna, well, congrats. Good job on winning the plate model quiz here. So I think what we can kind of notice or remember from this is, you know, it may be a bit hard to assess, but, you know, basically what you have to remember is the more grains and the more fuel or carbohydrates you're providing. So, you know, it's intended to be more for kind of a hard training day, or and you can also modify, like if you've cooked like a pasta dish, let's say that big penny, you know, dish that you have there, and it's just a rest training day, a rest day, then you may want to just, you know, add some veggie either to the mix, or you can have a salad on the side and have less of the pasta. And so that's a way of kind of changing the proportion of your plate. Okay, the other component of fuel for the work required is to provide enough carbohydrates during your training. And by modulating how, you know, if you have a longer training session, then you're gonna eat more carbs during that time because you need it, right? Because you have a longer training session. So that's an infographic that we use in the Revelstoke, at the Revelstoke training camp as well. So basically the idea was to say at least 20 grams of carbs per hour. So if you're training for 3 hours, then that would be at least 60 grams per hour. I would say that's the bare minimum, but you know, you can definitely eat more than that, okay? But you should try to, so for training sessions that are longer than 60 to 90 minutes, then you should try to pack at least 20 grams per hour. And so these are some examples of what 20 grams of carbohydrates means for you, okay? If it's not already there, I'll make sure that this infographic is available in the, on the OneDrive that is that athletes and coaches have access to.
Jen, I have a quick question that I think some of the athletes may be wondering.
Yeah.
So with that big plate of pasta that you showed, should I be eating that tonight, knowing that I have a hard workout tomorrow morning? Or should I be eating that after the workout? Because after the workout, it's not going to do much for me except help me kind of refuel. But in the meantime, today I have a rest day, but tomorrow I have intensity. So should I just eat a salad today?
Awesome question. It's more for what training day or training session you're going to do, like, you know, what is coming up for you. So if today was a training day, a rest day, sorry, and tomorrow morning you have an intensity, then you may want to, you know, stop prepping or planning for that session right now by eating more carbs. So planning that, you know, if it's either, you know, depending if it's considered hard training day or moderate training day based on, you know, the type of intensity and like how long the session is. And if there's, you know, a second training that same day as well. But yeah, you should, you know, select the type of meal based on what is coming up for you rather than the opposite. Yeah, good question. I should have mentioned that. Okay, so there are different ways to periodize. Like, so we've just talked about how to periodize from one meal to another, right? But now we're going to integrate a little bit more of kind of mesocycle, so a little bit of a longer planning, okay? Or long periodization over a longer period of time. So when we periodize, and it's the same thing for training, usually the training is planned around some either key training camps or key races. There's some elements that are set up in the training program, and then you plan the training around that and kind of towards those goals, or taking those into account. Well, same thing for nutrition. Okay, so we can look at kind of what are the key training sessions, and try to periodize or keep those in mind when we periodize nutrition. So altitude camp, I know you're not going to go on the Hague this year, that's what I've heard, but if I'm sure there are going to be other times where you do go to altitude, and that's actually considered kind of a key training period of the key session, and so we should have that in mind when we plan nutrition. Summer camp with hot temperatures, so when it's super warm, it's not the case right now in Whistler, but it might come at some point that it's getting hot, that we consider it's summer. I hope for those of you who are in the Okanagan or maybe in other places in BC, that summer arrived there. So those kind of camps are usually things we want to plan around. High volume camps as well, practice races, races for sure, and also high intensity training sessions. So those are kind of all key sessions that we want to kind of plan nutrition support around. There was a paper, scientific paper that was published 2 years ago on how we should periodize nutrition for optimal performance in individual and team sports. So I'm going to base some of what I'm going to tell you now on this paper. You can see there are a lot of things in this table. I'm not going to read the full thing, but basically all of this that is in the red square, those are all kind of potential nutrition interventions that can be periodized and things we should think about. In this table, there are also some comments or some elements of periodization for body composition or weight. I just want to briefly touch on this. I think at this stage of development where you are right now, it's more important to periodize other things. So to develop other nutrition skills, practices, than to focus on weight or body composition, okay? But you can know, now it's one of the things that can be periodized at a very elite level. That's a thing that is considered. But at kind of a junior, especially like under 18, I definitely do not recommend you try to change your weight on your own for sure, but generally we don't kind of encourage that kind of fluctuations in weight. If you do have questions around that, if you're concerned, please reach out to me. I can definitely discuss that further with you. If you're not convinced and you want to, and you think otherwise, I'm happy to have a conversation around that as well. But, for now, we're going to focus on other strategies than this. Okay, so we're gonna go kind of phase by phase. Okay, so general prep phase, that's the phase you're in right now. Okay, May to July. The training is generally includes high volume or long hours. Okay, and relatively low intensity as well. In the gym, there is usually an emphasis on hypertrophy, strength development, or strength endurance, kind of depending on your personal goals. It would be, 2 to 3 times a week. It may depend on your specific training plan, okay? But that's kind of what I got from Chris, General YPP. The summer, it's usually it would be summer during this time of the year. So, temperatures would start to go up, and that's something you want to think about as well in terms of, so that those are kind of the elements we we have in training. Now, what do we do in terms of nutrition to maximize that training? So there are a lot of potential nutrition goals here, okay? You can focus on fueling around long training sessions, so pre-effort meal and sufficient carbs during the training. You can ensure optimal recovery after those long training sessions. So that optimal recovery for that, what it would look like will be carbs, proteins, fluids, and electrolytes to make sure that you recover and be ready for the next one. It could be ensure optimal recovery, carbs, and protein after gym sessions. Another goal is to focus on hydration on and off training because it's hot temperatures. And also get your ferritin tested early May and adjust iron intake based on needs. So I'm sure for some of those goals don't feel new for you. You may be like, yeah, I've heard that before. I'm already doing some of those things. Awesome. Like that's what I would like to hear. But actually what I would recommend you doing, and that's kind of the exercise that I would suggest for you, is to pick one or two of those goals per training blocks. Okay, so looks like the training blocks are around 4 weeks long. So pick, the general prep phase is from May to July. So there would be about, 3 blocks in there. So you can pick 1 or 2 goals per training blocks to focus on. If you feel like you can focus on more goals and you want to, pick more, that's totally all right. The idea is just so that you're not overwhelmed, that you can kind of really focus on 1 or 2 aspects to really do well. And you may also just realize that there are things you're already doing really well, and it doesn't need to be a very important focus for you because you're already implementing those goals. Okay, specific prep phase here. So that would be from August to September. So what is going on in terms of training? Well, there's still long sessions, but there's a bit more high intensity training sessions as well. In the gym, there's an emphasis on max strength and power, usually 1 to 2 times a week. And then it's still summer, so there's still some warm temperatures. So in terms of potential nutrition goals, what can those be? So again, you can focus on fueling around key training sessions, which would be those high intensity or long sessions. Well, actually both, okay? So again, that would be pre-effort and fueling during. You can ensure optimal recovery after those key training sessions. You can, here's a kind of a new goal that wasn't there earlier. That's the emphasis on proper meal size based on needs. So actually looking at the plate model and try to kind of, identify based on the training what type of plate models you should focus on. Why did I just add this in the specific prep phase and not in the general phase? Is that I generally, what I see usually with athletes in the general phase is that the volume is so high that they just tend to, there's always kind of, every meal almost is a pre-effort meal. And so pretty much every meal is going to be a hard training plate, with exceptions for sure. But, people are just kind of feeling like they're so hungry to eat anyway. So it's usually more during specific prep phase that the need to fluctuate seems to really, to appear or to be more important. Ensure optimal recovery, again, after gym session, and then the same focus on hydration on and off training. And again, I would suggest that you pick 1 or 2 goals per training block and that you put that in your YTP. pre-comp phase. So that would be October and November. So training includes high intensity sessions, even more ski specific training than, you know, during general training. In the gym, there's usually maintenance of maximal strength and force 1 to 2 times a week. And then because it's October and November, there's kind of less sun exposure. That's kind of the environmental aspect of training here. In terms of potential nutrition goals, what could those be? So there's still the focus on fueling around key training sessions, okay? And those are going to be more high intensity sessions during that period of time. The optimal recovery, emphasis on proper meal size based on needs. So again, kind of choosing the right plate model based on the type of training you're going to do. And there's a new goal, practice race nutrition strategies during training trials. So because you're getting closer to race season, if there's any kind of specific nutrition strategies, either kind of breakfast before race that you want to try. Some people may have a hard time with, you know, you're not sure of what breakfast really works, what breakfast works for you, or maybe you're starting to do longer races, maybe a 30K or something, and you're able to set up kind of a longer, either a longer intensity session or kind of a practice race that is longer, and you may want to start to practice some of those fueling strategies for during a race. So that could be, you know, starting to practice those on roller ski trials or stuff like that. That could be a good time to retest ferritin if it's appropriate. So usually if your ferritin level wasn't that good in the spring, then you usually want to, you know, test it again during that period of time. And vitamin D, which is another kind of a new goal here again. The reason for recommending vitamin D is because there's less sun exposure. So actually from October to April in Canada, we consider that there's not enough sun to synthesize vitamin D from your skin. So that would be kind of another component to think about. What are the roles of vitamin D? I could, you know, go on, but quickly, bone health, immune system. And there's also more and more evidence around muscle strength with vitamin D. So most Canadians are deficient in vitamin D. So that's kind of a basic supplement that I recommend to everyone. Okay, now, so again, pick 1 or 2 goals and apply that. In the early competition phase, so in December, training includes high intensity sessions, some ski specific training, and then there's, you know, the first races of the season. In the gym, it's usually more of a taper. And then there's, you know, really low sun exposure during that time. So those are the training component. Now, what about the nutrition goals? We still keep the fueling around key training sessions, which are, you know, still relevant. Ensure optimal recovery, the proper meal size, and here I even added energy needs are likely lower. Usually, you know, it may depend, okay, not necessarily every week, but, you know, you may actually train less in that period of time than kind of in the summer. So that may be just something to think about and try to adapt your plate models based on how much training you're doing. And then practice race nutrition strategies during low level races. So all those strategies that either that breakfast kind of thing or fueling during a race that you've practiced during a trial kind of early in the fall, then you may want to think about, okay, you know, that breakfast strategy, try it before a low level race, try to implement that. And then vitamin D supplementation again, because it's winter. Okay, now competition phase. So between January and March, you know, training is high intensity ski specific situated around snow. It's racing season, so there's sometimes limited rest between races. If you have a weekend with 2 or 3 races in a row, for example. In the gym, maintenance of max strength and force. And then there's also international travels that happen usually during that period of time, and low sun exposure. So the goals, the first 3 goals here are, the same than the previous block or the previous phase. But here we have implement those race nutrition strategies. So those ones that you've tested in the previous phase, then that's kind of a time where you can implement that. There's also travel nutrition that may be something you want to consider during those that phase. So it could be either goals around jet lag. Yes, nutrition can have an impact on jet lag, like time of meals, for example, can have an impact on adapting to time zone difference more easily. Can also make some goals around packing. So some of you who've traveled to Europe before, you probably know that it's not all the food that we have here that are available in Europe and vice versa. So if you cannot think of a breakfast without peanut butter, then you need to think about packing it. So, those are kind of things that you may want to consider as goals if you've experienced, if these are gaps for you. And then vitamin D again, which is, something that I was there before. Okay, now last phase. Okay, so last phase is the recovery of April. I guess it was probably a bit earlier this year due to COVID, but usually it's kind of that reduced training, or you're doing cross training. There's some rest and recovery. And so if it's a rest day or, mostly rest day, then you may want to follow the rest plate model more. It could also be a good time to learn new cooking techniques or recipes. Vitamin D, you can keep taking it because April, it's still kind of considered low sun exposure. And then I just made a specific notes for iron because I see that in a lot of athletes who take iron, can take iron during the year or when they're training. Sometimes they think that because they're not training, then they don't need to take the iron, but it's actually probably the best time of the year to increase your ferritin level because you don't have the impact of training that brings it down. So actually, if you need, if you're on iron supplements because your ferritin was low, you should keep taking it in the recovery phase. So that may just be your goal for the recovery, right? You may that just like keep taking the iron supplement. Okay, I see I have some questions, so I'm just gonna go for it. Oh yeah, there was questions around ferritin level. Actually, I think that's kind of, so iron supplements, and how we periodize supplements throughout the year, or there are a lot of supplements out there, but I just kind of wanted to talk about those 2 that were already talked about in the other slides, but that's just a different way of presenting it. And for some people, it's just easier to kind of capture it. So iron, what would be the periodization of, or what would be the use? Ensure adequate ferritin levels, maximize training adaptation at altitude. And then when should you get it tested? At least once early in the prep phase. And as directed by your physician. So if your physician wants to see it, more often, then you should, follow that. And up to 8 weeks before altitude exposure. So why I'm like, you should do it early in May, usually when you go on to the Hague, is because that's about 10 weeks before the Hague, which is going to give you time to adapt your supplementation. There was a question on, so if your ferritin levels what should be the ferritin levels for female? And then Chris answered that CCBC would like to see ferritin levels above 50 at all times, especially when you're high volume and when you're fluctuating in altitude, such as at the Hague. So basically, if when you're testing in May, you're not at 50, then we usually consider a supplement so that when you're getting to altitude, you can actually get the most out of your training. And then if your ferritin level is good, so more than 50, are there foods you can eat that will keep your ferritin level good? Awesome, that's a good question. So yes, there are foods that are high in iron that you can keep taking. That's a whole kind of a conversation. But things like red meat are going to be high in iron, but there's quite a lot of plant-based options as well. Breakfast cereals are fortified in iron. Some beans are high in iron. Some tofu is also fortified in iron. And there's ways of actually there's also periodization in your iron-rich foods that we would recommend. So actually taking it on a rest day would lead to more absorption than if it's after a high intensity training. So actually rest day could be kind of a iron boosting day as well. Yeah. Okay. And then vitamin D, the use of that supplement would be recommended between October and April just due to less sun exposure. Then reason, immunity, muscular functions, and bone health. Okay. I know like time, flies and a little bit over. So I'll just go, I just have one example and then that's it. Is that good? I hope it's good for everyone. Okay. So an example here, a skier who is 20 years old, he doesn't cook much because he doesn't know how. He lives with roommates, has a hard time during summer training sessions in the heat. He doesn't always complete his hours on some days because, it just like, he just cannot do it in that heat. He has a hard time. His ferritin was at 35 last season. He had 2 altitude camps planned this year. So that's a 2019 season, not the 2020. And then lack of upper body strength. So he noticed that his, like double pulling and stuff like that is not as good as it could be. And then tends to do poorly in the second portions of 30K races, okay? So these are kind of the characteristics of this athlete. So what are the things that what are the goals he could pick and implement in his YTP to fill the gaps? Okay, so you can see during general prep phase, he's gonna do his blood testing and get a proper RN supplements early in the general phase so that he has time to increase his ferritin before the camps at altitude. He's gonna pay special attention to hydration and fueling during training in the heat and during high volume days, because you remember these were kind of gaps for him where he had a hard time completing the sessions. Emphasis on recovery, nutrition, following upper body resistance training. So because he has a hard time with, his upper body strength is not as good as it could be, then following the training, he's really gonna make sure he has this recovery snack right away after to maximize the gains, and then emphasis on fueling during altitude camps. Then oh, okay. Oh, okay, I see Eric. I was like, what are these comments? Or yeah, he can subscribe to Skip the Dishes or HelloFresh. Yeah, those are definitely options. I do have another suggestion. Specific prep phase, emphasis on recovery nutrition, following upper body. So he's gonna keep doing that, so that, because muscle don't just grow overnight. Okay, so he needs to make sure he's on top of his recovery after the upper body resistance training to maximize that. And then also emphasis on fueling during altitude camps. Then during pre-comp, he's gonna keep the upper body recovery after the upper body resistance training, and then he's gonna actually practice fueling with carbohydrates and caffeine gels, like those little glue gels that have some carbs and a little bit of caffeine in it. And he's gonna practice that during long training trials, because he had a hard time during the second part of the 30K. So he's like, if I get a little bit more, a better boost, a boost from food and caffeine, then maybe that's gonna help me in my 30K. But he's gonna practice that in the pre-comp, so in the fall, rather than just thinking about that the day before a race. Early comp, keep kind of the protein distribution to maintain the gains for upper body, and then test the fueling with the gels during a low level race, and test his ferritin again for just to check where it's at. And then he's going to implement the racing strategies during the 30K races, maintain his upper body gains. And then when he gets to, recovery, enjoy good food, but in moderation, practice cooking skills. That's where the, cooking skills comes in, and then keep taking his iron supplements. So I hope this helps you to kind of see how it can be periodized and how it can evolve over the year. I have a question on iron supplements. So is there a time of the day that iron should be taken? Actually, based on some relatively recent research, if you're able to take it in the morning, it may be better absorbed than if it's at night. The trick though is that if you take your iron supplement with calcium, the absorption is impaired. So if you consume dairy products like milk, yogurt, with your breakfast, then you're probably better to not take your iron with breakfast. You may take it at a different time of the day. And should it be taken with food or not? If you're able to take your iron supplement without food and it doesn't create any gastrointestinal problems, then it's going to lead to better absorption. Or you can take it with just a food rich in vitamin C. So that could be like a fruit, or some like bell peppers, or a little bit of food rich in vitamin C with your iron supplement. That could be another option, because sometimes it creates some stomach pain if it's just on an empty stomach. Okay, and everyone is different. So, you have to ask what makes a difference for your training, okay? And so that's where it comes in. Put this into practice, kind of a 4-step process here. One is asking, what are your gaps? You probably already thought about that. What are your gaps that can be addressed with nutrition in terms of your training? Select 1 or 2 goals per mesocycle to address these gaps, and write them in your YTP. So try to think a few goals that can address the gaps, and think where could that fit, when am I going to tackle those goals. And then ask for feedback from your coaches. They know them, they know you better than I do. I'm sure they're going to be able to give you good feedback on, whether those goals make sense for your training and for your training gaps. But I'm really happy to, review those goals with you. So you can set up a meeting with me. You can just email me, and then we can find a time that works for both of us. So what would you remember? Nutrition periodization helps to support, enhance, and maximize the adaptations to training. And every athlete is different. So should be their nutrition plan, okay? So your training plan is kind of individualized for you. So now it's time to think about how you can individualize your nutrition plan as well. I have a question. I received a question. And that's the end of the presentation. I'm just gonna answer the questions now. So I saw a question in the chat. Do gels with caffeine gives you more energy? So that's an excellent question. So I actually call caffeine being kind of a fake. It gives you fake energy, because how caffeine works is that it actually shuts down the message that in your brain that tells you you're tired. So basically, there's a message being sent saying like, you're tired, but you don't receive the message, so you don't feel tired. Okay, but it's not proper energy in the sense that it doesn't provide you calories, which is what helps your muscles actually contract and do the work. Why I put gels with caffeine in the example is that those gels that have 25, 50 milligram of caffeine can, it's not a huge dose, but it's enough to give a little bit of that boost, and especially towards the end of a very long race, then it can shut down that message of fatigue. And yes, there's good research showing that caffeine can be helpful during endurance in endurance sports. So the question is, would you recommend caffeine gels for hard training sessions? Like if that helps you to finish the training session or do it with better quality, yes, but I don't think you should rely only on caffeine for to do those training sessions. So I would try to make sure you fueled enough first in terms of carbohydrates and hydration, and then caffeine can be a bonus on top. But I wouldn't just rely on caffeine for energy. Okay, I think those are the questions that I received. What would be a good lunch meal after a workout? Excellent. Well, it could be a lot of things. First, I would say, is that just a recovery kind of meal, or is that also a pre-effort meal? Like, is there an afternoon workout, basically? Because if there's an afternoon workout, then you want to think about something that can provide you with the fuel in the afternoon as well. What could be a good lunch meal? Well, it could be a lot of things, It needs to have some carbs for replenishing your energy stores, and some protein and some veggie. And it also needs to be quick, okay? Because you want to have it kind of right away, especially if it's kind of your recovery. So I would say for something quick, any sort of sandwiches or wraps would be pretty quick to make. If you have any leftovers of whatever you have, with some greens and protein and some veggie, that would be good as well. Especially if you feel like you were dehydrated, you could even have a soup around. So it could be like a veggie soup, let's say, that's going to provide with the veggie and hydration, and then you can get some of your carbs and protein from that. Now it could be also, I like to make like pasta salad or rice salads, because that's, you can make it ahead of time, and then you can just have it when you need it. So that's actually also a good meal for after workout. So I hope I answered the question. Actually, I just wanted to go back and show the plate model, just so you have that in mind. So, if there's a training in the afternoon, then that means you have a double session. So it's likely a hard training day. So you want to make sure you have those grains in. Okay, and then I have a follow-up question on the caffeine thing. I like that. So, but if caffeine tricks your brain to think that you have no fatigue or pain, then why is it not a banned substance? Well, good. That's a good question. It was actually on the banned substance list for a while, but there are different reasons why they removed it from the banned substance list. So one is that actually the values of how much you, so the tests to check how much caffeine you've used are not very precise, because people metabolize caffeine at different rates. So, you know, they couldn't rely on the test a whole lot to know exactly how much caffeine you've used, because they set up like a benchmark, right? A limit of caffeine, because most people use caffeine in their life. Just, you know, if you drink coffee or tea or even chocolate, dark chocolate, like you're gonna have some caffeine in your system. So they had to kind of establish that benchmark. So that's one of the reasons. And actually the second reason is that there was more research coming up showing that you can actually have benefits of very low dose of caffeine on your performance. So then it was really hard to distinguish between caffeine for performance or caffeine for enjoyment of your coffee and just lifestyle. So yeah, so because, you know, the caffeine in those gels, like the cool gels, that's less than the caffeine in one coffee. So it's a pretty small amount of caffeine. Yeah, so I hope I answered the caffeine question. I'm there if you have any other questions. If not, then I'm gonna, you know, wish you good luck in the nutrition periodization and how you can, you know, try to implement that in your YTP. And if you have any difficulties, your coaches are there and I'm there as well. So I'm happy to support you in that sense.
Thank you very much, Jen. Just so everyone also remembers that you guys do have a few, courtesy of CrossFit BC, you have a few sessions with Jen. If you do have questions throughout the year, I think Dev Squad has 2 and the BC team has 3 sessions which you can contact Jen and you can go over goals and setting up sort of the templates to what to achieve your goals and such like that. So don't forget that is there and is available to you. A lot of you have filled out the nutrition questionnaire. In order for us to, I would say, make the program better and make sure we catch all our gaps, please finish that questionnaire for those who have not done it. It's a little bit long, but bear with us because that sort of gives us the foundation which we need to build on. So please fill that out. I think other than that, thank you very much, Jen. That was awesome. Much appreciated for all of that. If anyone has any other questions, we will call it for the night. And if anyone has any questions, Eric, Maria, and myself are also always available if you have any technique or other coaching questions as well. All right, everybody, thank you very much. You guys enjoy your evening. Have fun. If you haven't had supper yet, enjoy supper. And we'll chat with you next Monday. All right, everybody. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denise, a quick question before I leave you. Where do you want to stay in Revelstoke?
Wherever. It doesn't matter to me.
Like, do you want you want like bunk beds, or you want like a single bed? Like, what do you want, buddy?
I would prefer my own bed.
It's under the truck.
Okay, that sounds good. Our first session is up at the hill. So, I mean, we can stay out the hill if we want as well. Like, there's no, like, if you,
Sure.
or if you can stay in town, doesn't matter.
Is it ski striding?
It is ski striding, exactly, the first morning, yeah. And then the last day we were actually skiing out there as well, out by the airport. So it's not a bad spot to position ourselves, but it's really hard to, like, if you're like so drunk after Saturday night, like it's a long way, still hot hike for you. Like, I'll be
I'm totally into that.
Yeah, if you have any preferences, I'm going to wait for another day or two, see if we can get anything cheaper. But I'll aim for that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to send out an email to the group though to bring striding poles
Yes.
because they think it's running.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, striding is definitely what we are aiming for. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
That's a good point. I think I will make sure that that is sent out.
Do you know how many people have registered?
We have, one sec here, I just happen to have it up somewhere around here. I think there's at least 17. It's quite a few. More than I thought there was going to be, I think. I talked to Matt today. One sec, I'm just trying to pull up the...
in the zone 4?
I just have the current list of what I was sent by Revelstoke. Oopsie. By the office, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17,
19.
19 people. Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good. That's a good number.
Yep.
And that's with your 4 minions. Oh, we actually have on this list. I have 20 actually.
Okay.
Even though there's one missing from the zone 4, we actually have 20 people with your. I forgot that.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Jen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll see if I can upload that like as a PowerPoint or as a PDF in the OneDrive.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Perfecto.
It was like I had to sign in, and then I was like in OneDrive to add files. So maybe I'm not able to.
You can send it to me, and then I can add it individually to everybody's too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Eric, I will open up the athlete box to you. So there'll be an athlete folder that we've started, and each in the athlete folder, there's like all the general stuff. Like that's where Dave Freeze is adding his mental stuff, and Jen will be adding hers, and all that kind of stuff will be added into there. Physiotherapy will be in there, and such like that. So all the sort of the those modalities will be in there. So it's easier just to add it into that, and they can just go in and grab it if they and look at it if they want. So we don't have to add it individually.
Okay.
I will add that I will open that up to you and Adam tomorrow, so you can see the coach and the athlete version of what we're doing. And if you have any good links that you think are awesome, throw them in.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, team.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to Eric if you have time for your master project.
Okay, one sec here. I just also have to.
I think